What is up, guys? Welcome to a brand new Flash review for the kind of finale, part 1 of Bloodwork's story arc so far this season, and that was titled The Last Temptation of Barry Allen. Now, things got very, very serious this episode, especially with that ending, and this is pretty crazy if you think about it, as this is right before Crisis on Infinite Earths. But, you know, this episode was fantastic. Definitely one of the best of the season so far. The acting chops from basically everyone was really on point. Now, this was obviously very focused on, you know, Barry Allen himself and Bloodwork. Sure, we had a little bit of Iris West sprinkled throughout the episode, a tiny bit of Killer Frost and, you know, Cisco trying to help Barry and stuff like that. But mainly, I have to give the props to Grant Gustin's acting chops this episode because of the turmoil that he was going through this Bloodwork infection. It really demonstrated some of his best work on The Flash, and I feel like as a lot of us can agree, because I've seen this said in so many other places in so many different times, that, you know, Grant Gustin is kind of his best in his acting chops as Barry Allen when he's in scenes like this, which is, you know, sad to say because he's going through something horrible in this episode, but hey, you know, it really shows the dramatic side of him, and I just really enjoyed this episode through all the different things we got to see through Bloodwork's temptations. But before we get into all of the details for this episode, guys, be sure to go ahead and like this video if you do go on to enjoy it. Subscribe for more Flash content like this. By the way, sorry there's no face cam today, having a couple of camera issues, but I hope you guys don't mind too much. Other than that, the review will be going forward as usual. But without further ado, let's get into this episode, which saw us starting off right where we left off at the end of last week's episode with Ralph fighting Bloodwork. Now, this saw a demonstration of their powers, which, you know, are kind of similar with, you know, even though their powers really aren't the same, they do kind of present in a very similar way in terms of the CGI on screen. But this eventually saw Ralph trying to dodge all of Bloodwork's projectiles, but unfortunately he still got infected, which saw him get healed in a way that I wouldn't have really thought of. So it turns out that Barry can give Speedforce blood transfusions, which allows Ralph to heal at a rate that he just naturally couldn't, as he isn't a speedster. But as a result of this, Barry also got infected, which led to the chain of events that we saw this episode, which I really thoroughly enjoyed because it kind of gave us an insight into Barry's mind. It allowed Bloodwork, the main villain of, you know, 6A or graphic novel part 1, to essentially learn everything about Barry, which, you know, gave him the reveal that he is the Flash and allowed him to get into his mind and try and twist him kind of against the Speedforce by catering to Barry's wants and desires for the future. And as we all know, guys, Barry of course wants to live. He wants to have a daughter with Iris, you know, a second coming of Nora, if you will, which was even teased later on in the episode. And, you know, you have to admit, I completely understand Barry's struggle because it turns out that Bloodwork cells will, in fact, allow Barry somehow to survive Crisis. I don't exactly know how, but I guess you kind of have to trust the comic book logic there of somehow it will counter the antimatter from crumbling him away like we saw way back in episode 2, I believe, you know, in the future. But that, of course, would be at the expense of everything good about Barry Allen, his heart, his soul, and, you know, that's because he would be low-key corrupted by Bloodwork, just kind of as we saw at the end of the episode. But, you know, this allowed for some really, really cool scenes to kind of really tempt Barry into submitting or, you know, being bent to Bloodwork's will. So, for example, this saw all of those graves of those that the Flash has lost, such as Eddie, his mother, Harrison Wells, or H.R. Wells, Martin Stein, Nora, Henry Allen. The list just goes on. Bloodwork even went as far as presenting him a kind of futuristic scene of, you know, baby Nora being in that crib with a bunch of excess symbols hanging above it. And then, you know, that's just, you know, only a very powerful drive for Barry, because especially as he got to hang out with his daughter last season and then realizing that because of Crisis came forward, he wouldn't even get to hold her as a baby for the first year or two or whatever it was originally, before the Crisis event originally happened, because before Barry originally disappeared, he did get to spend a little bit of time with baby Nora before the Flash went missing in Crisis. But this time round, it would literally be nothing. Also, at this rate, there would also be no baby Nora, since, you know, Crisis is literally only in a couple of weeks, so unless Iris randomly got pregnant in the next couple of weeks, then yeah, rip Nora forever. Also, to add even more fuel for fire, Barry was presented with all of his fears of the results of him dying in Crisis. For example, Central City essentially burning, he would be leaving Iris alone forever. The Reverse Flash even popped up and said she's even faster than ever. The negative speed forces were even too much for me, or something like that. So I don't know if he was kind of insinuating that he would have corrupted Nora as she grew up without Barry with the negative speed force, but then again, again, this doesn't really make sense given what I just said, because Iris would have never been pregnant if Barry died in this crossover permanently, for example. So yeah, but trust me, if you turn those subtitles on, Reverse Flash literally said she's faster than ever. So I don't know really what they were going with there, unless I'm missing something completely obvious. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below either way. Bloodwork also went as far as showing the Flash that he could do more good work as a hero as well. For example, in that scene where there was a car crash with that girl and we saw the Flash appear and he used his Bloodwork powers to kind of revive her. I mean, we don't know if she was properly dead, maybe she was. By the way, he completely saved her through using that really weird kind of dark mark on his hand. That's what it reminds me of anyway, through the blood coming out. And this is essentially what Ramsey Russo wants, obviously, for nobody to die and eternal life. So no matter what's going on with Barry here, sure, like in a pure sense of mind, he would see through all of this, and you have to take into account the fever and kind of corruption he was undertaking. But at the same time, in the deep inner heart and desires of Barry Allen, this is all appealing to him, especially the saving stuff for the future, being there for Iris, being there with Nora, but also saving people. This is all very tempting to Barry. But then on the opposite side of things this episode, of course, we had the Speedforce representing themselves as Barry's mother, as usual, trying to say to not give in to Bloodwork. As I kind of teased earlier, they acknowledged that Bloodwork's cells will allow Barry to save the world from crisis and still survive, but it would be also, at the risk of giving up everything good about him. But a fascinating thing I found about this in the episode, which I found to be a very strong scene, is when Barry was giving into the fever and started blaming the Speedforce because he kind of felt like they'd rather him be the Flash than have him get anything that he wants. For example, surviving crisis. Like the call of duty is the more important thing, such as dying and saving the world. But what about Barry? As Barry put it himself in his own words, he kind of doesn't want to die and he feels like he's finally living for himself. Whereas being the Flash, it was kind of put upon him. He was struck by the lightning bolt. This was done to him. And to be honest, as he said as well, he kind of had no choice in the matter. So all of this combination of things that we saw in the episode was really enjoyable to unwatch. It was very emotional, as I said, very strong acting from Grant Gustin and Bloodwork. And I have to say, just like I said at the end of last week's episode, that Bloodwork looks really hideous. The makeup just looks, I don't know, it just looks really disgusting, but also really fitting for how corrupt the characters got. It's like a true representation of Bloodwork or Ramsey Russo's corruption, but this is also nothing at what we're going to see in the next episode with his final form, which was also teased later, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. All of this amounted up until this moment where Barry was kind of being torn apart by the Speedforce, as well as Bloodwork's powers, literally consuming both sides of him. But also, I totally forgot to mention that Barry went all out Reverse Flash by even, doing the vibrational hand through the representational Speedforce avatar of his mother, which was kind of interesting for Barry to go there. But as I said, he was kind of losing his mind at this point, and that is when Barry woke up. But I knew the second we saw him, even though he was smiling to Cisco, just the way he was acting, it was more than abundantly obvious that things weren't right. And I don't know if you guys were kind of paying attention to the behind the scenes stuff anyway, in terms of filming, but we all kind of knew that Barry would be getting a bit negative flashy, and that is where things were certainly headed. But let's talk a little bit about Iris. I wanted to save her separately towards the ending part of this review, just because there wasn't so much going on. As I said, this episode was mainly about the battle between Barry, the Speedforce if you will, and Bloodwork. But this episode for Iris very interestingly saw the further pursuit of the kind of black hole criminal organization that they seem to be setting up for the second half villains. I mean, that's not confirmed or anything, but it does seem that this is being, as I said before, kind of trickled throughout the episodes with that pin, that logo if you will, shown through the various photos we've seen, up until the point in this episode where Iris questioned that guy who's been seen in the photos, and he presented a business card, and they were like going by the name of the Maelstrom Couriers, I believe it was, transporting what the wealthy prefer to keep under the radar. And as they said, they're basically the Uber for the uber rich. I found it fairly interesting when Allegra kind of said that she wanted to be a reporter because of Iris's report on the streak. Apparently Iris's, I believe, blog post way back then made her believe she could be like her, chasing stories, uncovering the truth. But the thing is, Iris kind of never really did that, which I don't think is unfair to say. I mean, many people agree that's why they're giving her all of this now and a bit of last season, but mainly now because they never developed on that before. So I don't know, I just I don't know if any of you felt the same. I found it interesting that she literally used the words, how Iris used to chase stories, she uncovered the truth. I just don't feel like they ever showed that. But as far as looking into the whole mystery organization, they go to a crime scene where that guy that Iris questioned died in the same lot that she questioned him in earlier on in the episode. So things are getting very suspicious there. Obviously, whoever is in control of all of this is trying to keep things under wraps, and as Joe said himself, it's like a ghost did this. I don't know about you guys, but I'm very intrigued to see exactly what they're cooking up here, potentially for the second half of the season. And lastly, for things for Iris this episode, she had to confront the fact that she had to get closer, or at least start writing that Flash goes missing in Crisis article, which definitely has a different picture than the one that we originally saw, which, I guess makes sense because, things have changed in this timeline. But either way, I did enjoy this scene. It was quite feelsy. I guess she wants to get ahead of it rather than write it at the time, kind of prepare herself. And this, this whole season so far has been building up to, preparing the city or just preparing the various characters for a possible world. So this was a nice little kind of nod to what will be happening, even though we know that Barry will be coming back for the rest of Flash Season 6 and Season 7, but, let's just pretend, I guess. As for Nash Wells, I honestly didn't think we were going to see him this episode. After all of that Barry stuff and the Iris stuff, I thought, okay, they're just honestly longing out the whole wall situation that he's trying to get through. But we actually had that moment where he used this kind of new techie tool to actually get to the point where the wall got revealed with those symbols. Now, these symbols are very interesting. We don't exactly know what they mean just yet, but we did hear that line from Nash Wells saying, Marnovu, you ran and ran across infinite Earths, and now you've nowhere left to run. So not too much clarity here. It was just a little bit of, crumbs being fed to the audience to make sure we do still stay tuned for what that big reveal is and whatever is in that room. I'm still liking the theory that I kind of went with, that possibly this Nash Wells has a personal vendetta against the Monitor. Maybe his Earth was one of the Earths that was destroyed, similar to that of Earth 90's Barry Allen's Flash. His world was destroyed in a test from the Monitor to find the Ultimate Heroes. I'm not saying this is going to happen or it happens exactly like that, but it's more than evident that Nash Wells has something against the Monitor, and I just can't wait to find out what that specifically is. And, now he's basically there, apart from he still has to get through that symbol side of the door, unless it just opens. Who knows? I guess we're gonna have to wait and see. Now, I've already briefly spoke about when Barry woke up, but I do want to quickly address that Killer Frost moment, like when she kind of had that panic attack, and then she said towards the end of the episode as well that Katie would be handling future medical emergencies because of what happened. But I was just thinking, like, well, why were you handling it in the first place? I don't know if you guys are gonna come back at me and say maybe Killer Frost can access the data from, Caitlyn's mind, and that's why she's doing the medical stuff herself, but I don't really believe that because she didn't know what to do. So I just don't know why in the first place she just didn't flip over to Caitlyn. It just doesn't really make sense to me. It was kind of a bit of a redundant story. I'm not saying I'm not enjoying Killer Frost. In fact, I really am this season, but I just don't know what the big deal about that was. But this is when we got to the very ending of the episode, everyone, where Iris basically spotted that this wasn't Barry. To be honest, Team Flash, like Cisco, should have probably realized this as well. It was fairly obvious that he was kind of acting strange, and this is exactly what the Speedforce meant, that he would basically kind of be the same, but without everything that made Barry, or the Flash, and that was him kind of acting like this weird robot version of Barry, and that's because he was infected with what seems to look like or be represented as this kind of negative Speed Force, and it was really, really cool. It kind of took me back to this nostalgic feeling of the earlier seasons of The Flash, just seeing the different colored lightning for the first time, whether that be through Zoom or like the Reverse Flash and stuff like that. But now we got to see this kind of black, kind of corrupted-esque Speed Force, which was just really awesome to see because, of course, Bloodwork has bent Barry to his will. But that is when we also got that scene at the end of the episode with Ramsey Russo donning himself actually as the name Bloodwork, but we also got that tease of his final form in the form of a shadow on the wall. And I'm not sure how many of you are aware that we're actually getting like a boss form film of Bloodwork next episode, which I really hope does turn out well for the CGI, and I'm not saying that in a bad way for the CW or anything. It's just this is going to be a whole bunch of CGI to reflect his more comic book accurate Bloodwork look. But my hopes and wants with this is just that it's kind of done in a decent way. Like, I guess if they've saved it up for this point, they will probably have spent a little bit of money into making it look pretty awesome, and considering it's the final episode for Ramsey Russo, aka Bloodwork, I'm sure it's going to be really decent. And then of course we had the camera panning into the evil Bloodworked up version of Barry, and I have to say, like, he looked really creepy. I really like it when Grant Gustin, or should I say Barry, is evil. Like, I'm one of the, I don't know, I know lots of other people say this, but I also see lots of other people say the opposite as well. I really liked seeing Grant Gustin do the evil Savitar version of Barry in season 3, so just seeing him get really evil looking in this episode as well was definitely refreshing and reminiscent of that, and I really can't wait to see some of that play out in the next episode before he kind of snaps back to normal. But overall, everyone, I thoroughly enjoyed this episode. It was definitely one of the best of this season. I think, you know, The Flash does really well when it shows dramatic episodes like this. Bloodwork as a villain getting in his head this way was definitely up there with some of the other villains and was very unique. And you know, say what you will about Bloodwork, I think he's been a fairly decent villain. Out of all the other villains, I don't know, I haven't really processed where I rank him yet, but it's definitely been an enjoyable ride, and it's just so crazy to say that it's ending next episode. So yeah, let me know all of your thoughts, all of your theories, all of your speculation. Other than that, everyone, if you did enjoy this review, sorry it was a little bit different today, but I'd really appreciate it if you did enjoy it to hit that like button, and of course subscribe for more videos just like this if you're brand new, or stay subscribed with the notification bell button turned on if you're already subscribed, just so you never miss out on a future video. Be sure to check out my past couple of videos that should be appearing on screen right now. If you want to talk The Flash even further with me, I do have a Discord server. The link will be in a top pinned comment down below. But that is absolutely everything, guys, so thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you speedsters in the next video. Goodbye.